Today is October 20th, 2024. And today we're going to continue our talk about Peter. We're going to look at his life today, kind of give an overview of who this man, this disciple Peter was. If you watch The Chosen, a series that is about the life of Jesus, which I highly recommend. If you have not watched it yet, please do. It'll bless you so greatly. But if you have watched it already, you probably have a good feel of who Peter was and what he was kind of like. Even though The Chosen is actually fictional, you have to remember that so much of it is very biblical, but biblically based. And Peter is depicted quite accurately, I think, in what we read in the Bible. And so you get a feel for what he's like. And so we're going to begin today to talk about Peter's life. His original name is Simon. It was actually Jesus who changed his name to Peter, and we're going to discuss that a little later on, because it's a very important thing in the life of Peter and how it applies in our life as well. First of all, we know that Peter was the brother of Andrew. Andrew was also a fisherman, as Peter was, and as soon as Andrew met Jesus, he knew he was the Messiah, and so he was very instrumental in bringing Peter to meet Jesus. In fact, that when Andrew brought Peter to Jesus and Jesus met him, Jesus prophesied that Simon's name would be changed to Peter, which means rock. Peter means rock. In the Greek it says Cephas. C-E-P-H-A-S. They were fishermen, as I said, and in Mark 1:16-18 it tells us that they were at the Sea of Galilee fishing when Jesus came and called them and said, "Hey, follow me. Will you follow me?" The word tells us they did. They just up and went to follow Jesus. They gave it all up. So let's take a look at what a fisherman was like in this day and age. I read an article by Jack Wellman, and the name of the article is the Apostle Peter's biography, his timeline, life, and death. And so I'm going to read you a quote from this article about what fishermen were like in biblical times. All right, so it says, fishermen at that time were gruff, unkempt, vile, shabbily dressed, and often used vulgar language. The fishermen of the first century were a man's man. They were full of vigor and had boisterous tempers. Theirs was a rough life, since fishing was very physically demanding, and they must have been somewhat fearless too, because some of the storms that would come quickly upon the Sea of Galilee were very fierce and furious. They often caught the fishermen by surprise and could easily capsize the 20 to 30 foot boats that they used for fishing. You know, you look at this description of fishermen and you think, why would Jesus call men like this? Okay, he called Peter or Simon, and he called Andrew. He didn't stop there. James and Andrew also joined them, and they were fishermen as well. I think about that, and I think Jesus wanted some tough men, and so he called the fishermen. Anyway, let's go on with that. We're going to look at some highlights of Peter's life. I'm just going to kind of go through a few things that the Word tells us about who he was and what he experienced with Jesus. One of the first things that happened was that Jesus went to Peter's house, where his mother-in-law also lived, and she was sick. And Jesus heals her. So this was like, his first like, whoa, what's happening here? Who is this man? Peter had been fishing all night. Jesus shows up and says, go out into the deep. Go out a little further and you'll catch some fish. Peter says, hey, like, it's a little hard to believe because he says, Jesus, we fished all night and we caught nothing. But I will, because you say so, I will do it. They do it. Well, what happens? Jesus' word is true. They catch a bunch of fish. A great number of fish, it says in Luke 5:4-7. Then we see in Matthew 9:23-26 that when Jesus raised the little girl from the dead, Peter was one of the witnesses there. And we'll see this, that in more than one situation where Peter and James and John are like the little groupies that get to be on the inside of what Jesus is doing. And so when Jesus raised his little girl from the dead, Peter was able to witness that. And I'm telling you these things because it's important as we continue studying about Peter that we are aware of his relationship and what he got to experience with Jesus. There were some amazing things. Then we have just what most of us know about is the disciples had gone ahead on the boat and Jesus stayed behind. And so in the middle of the night, they see someone walking on the water, and here it is, Jesus. What does Peter do? He says, Jesus, I want to come out. I want to walk on the water too. And Jesus says, come on. And so he does. I mean, this is like one of these supernatural stories, isn't it? Where Peter does walk on the water to Jesus. But then we know that when he takes his eyes off of Jesus, he sinks. But again, think about the character of Peter right now, in that he had this drive in him or something in him to say, I want to walk on the water too. None of the disciples that we know of said they wanted to walk on the water. It was just like in Peter, let me do this. Then in Matthew 6:16-18, we find where Jesus asks the disciples a question. He says, who do people say I am? And they gave him, different answers. And then Jesus asks a pointed question to the disciples, and he says, who do you say I am? Well, Peter spoke right up, and he made the declaration that you, Jesus, are the Son of God. And that is when Jesus responds and says, and tells him, this was revealed to you by my Father. It wasn't like it came up out of his own mind or own thinking, but by the Father had revealed this to Peter, and Peter declared it. And then Jesus at this time says, from now on, Simon, you will be called Peter, the rock, because on this rock, on you, Peter, I'm going to build my church. What? Wouldn't that just like blow your mind? We're going to talk more about what's in a name, what's in that name next round. So we're going to go on here to what else Peter experienced with Jesus. It was shortly after he had this encounter with Jesus and his name was changed that Jesus is telling the disciples, I'm going to be killed and then raised the third day. And this was in Matthew 16:21-23. And what does Peter do there? No way. This is not going to happen to you. It's like Peter says, I'm telling you what's going to happen. Jesus has to rebuke him and say, get behind me, Satan. So from Peter being the rock to being rebuked, and what a contrast. Again, who Peter was just, he was sometimes didn't think things through. I guess impulsive is the word. So we see that happened, had a situation with that, and then Peter, along with James and John, had a most amazing encounter with the supernatural when they were able to go up on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus, and Jesus was transfigured, and Moses and Elijah show up. I mean, just like, what? They didn't know what to do but fall to the ground, and they're like, so again, this was a powerful, amazing, supernatural encounter. And so we see where Jesus, or Peter, we see a lot of how he responds in all these situations. And we find that because of these situations, Peter had to be very close to Jesus. And Jesus saw in him not the fisherman anymore, but he was seeing a mighty man of God. And when in John 6:68 to 69, it says, then Simon Peter answered him. Because Jesus says, some of the disciples, not the 12 disciples, but other people that had followed him, had turned away because they couldn't quite grasp what some of the things that Jesus was saying. It was so kingdom, so unbelievable. And so they left. And Jesus says to his disciples, are you going to go too? Peter was committed to Jesus, and he said, Lord, to whom should we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we believe and we are sure that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Peter was a man who is committed to Jesus. So what happened? Why did he deny him? This is kind of what this whole study is about. We're looking at Peter's life. What caused him to turn and deny Christ at Jesus' most important time? Stay tuned. Next week, or next time, we're going to be talking about what's in the name. We're going to look at a little culture at Peter, Simon, and see what that's about. All right, have a blessed day.